Okay, continuing with the ontological argument. This one, as I mentioned before, is a little bit confusing to some people, and there's some different versions of it. But basically, it's that I have the idea of a being greater of which no greater being can be conceived. Okay, so you can't think of anything greater, any being greater. You've got this concept of the greatest being there to be. All right, that idea includes everything essentially belonging to it, such as being. Of course, the being would exist. That goes without saying in your mind, in this imagined being. Okay, but premise 2 says to exist actually is greater than just possibly. So naturally, it follows that therefore the idea of that which nothing greater can be conceived includes this idea of existence, which belongs, therefore, to its necessity. It has to be. It's a little bit wordy. Maybe I can find a way to word that somewhere. But the idea of this greatest being includes that it would actually exist, but to exist in actuality is greater than just existing in your imagination, right, or as a possibility. So therefore, that being must exist. This is the argument. The obvious weakness in this is just because you imagine something doesn't make it so. All right, I mean that's the simple refutation of this. Okay, that which nothing greater can be conceived exists is this that we call God. Is the argument. Okay, this is stated in two different ways. The argument first of all, can be looked at as it originally was presented by St. Anselm. God is by definition an absolutely perfect being. This is another way of looking at it. We talked about a being greater than which no being can exist. Well, he has some presuppositions, all right? I mean, by the name given there, St. Anselm, okay? He is attached to the Christian church. He's associated that way. His belief system follows with those doctrines. And so he is coming from that presupposition. What's a presupposition? An assumption. He assumes God. All right? So, you know, when he already has that worldview, and he's talking to people that share that worldview, it becomes a little bit of a circular argument. But it makes sense to those who fit that same worldview. If you're a pantheist, you don't have to buy the argument, okay? Because your presupposition is different. But he says God is by definition an absolutely perfect being. An absolutely perfect being cannot lack anything by definition, all right? But a being that exists has something that a being that does not exist lacks, and that is existence. Okay, therefore, an absolutely perfect being must exist. And he's using some semantics here. If you buy into these definitions of an absolutely perfect being includes this in its definition, then that. Okay, there's a little bit of a syllogism going on here. It's logical, the argument that he's making. What you have to buy is the presuppositions. You have to buy the premises that he makes in order for the argument to work. If you don't buy those premises, then the argument fails because you don't buy the premises in the first place. All right, if you don't agree with A or B, then C as the conclusion is not necessarily going to have to work for you because you disagree with the premise. All right. Therefore, an absolutely perfect being must exist. Is the final stage of this. All right. Got it? And I have provided that in your outline. Just so you understand that that's there. I don't want to in any way not encourage you to take notes. I want you to take notes. You ready? Okay. All right. Another way to look at this, God is by definition a necessary being. Again, you have to buy the premise for the argument to work. God is by definition a necessary being. A necessary being must exist. Well, okay. A necessary being, yeah. You know, the logic follows there. All right, he's making sense. Otherwise, it would not be a necessary being. Okay? Therefore, a necessary being, and forgive my poor wording, necessarily exists. A necessary being must exist. Alright, a necessary being by definition. Now, again, it's semantics, word games that we've got going on to some degree here, because you're having to buy into this. He's by definition a necessary being. Again, your worldview depends on, if you're a pantheist, when we're talking about God being outside of, standing outside of the universe or anything like that, being the prime mover or first cause or anything, he doesn't specify that. That's what underlying what he's getting at there. Okay, he's thinking in terms of the Christian God. He's not thinking in terms of the pantheistic God. All right. So, if God is a necessary being, and the atheist says no, and of course that's on the worldview chart here. The atheist says, what God? Of course God is not necessary, because there is no God. How can you say necessary? So, at the very, very core of your presuppositions, your worldview, there's room for disagreement here. All right.
Where's the worldview chart?
I haven't given it to you yet. Tell me, this one? Yeah, that's what I said. I'm going to make copies. That's something that I didn't do yet. Meant to do that with the other stuff that I gave you, and I'll do that here in a little bit if they're open. Okay, the pantheistic argument. Now, this is an argument for the existence of a God, but it is not a God outside of the universe, apart from, different from. It is God is everything, and everything is God. So this is the pantheistic argument. All right, it's just everything is God, and how that ends up looking could be interpreted differently. But it's not that God is out here and He made the universe. It's simply the universe is God. It's part of. Okay, part of God. God is basically in everything, or everything that exists is a part of that whole divine being. Okay, it bases that everything reports a certain unity. That unity is all-inclusive and in some sense divine, and exists from only one being. It's all unified. It's all together. Okay. So if you have this worldview, a lot of the arguments that we've looked at don't work. You see that? They're not going to work, because the universe becomes the thing that's just always existed in itself. Material universe, whatever, everything. It's all just always been here. There's no Big Bang. It came from anywhere. It didn't have to. It just was always was there. Okay.